has arisen from the order of Melchizedek, and that's where Jesus comes in. He's coming in apart from the law that was set up, apart that could make us perfect, after a different order, be a new high priest that could fully bring us into right relationship with God. And so now we get to our setting up that Jesus is the better, the superior high priest, first of all, because of the nature of this new priesthood, this priesthood according to the order of Melchizedek. And so, if you've been in church for a while, this name Melchizedek, maybe a name that you've heard before, maybe not. Because really, outside of the book of Hebrews, he's only brought up 5 verses in the rest of the Old Testament. Okay? So, as we've been going through the book of Hebrews, starting in chapter 4, we saw that Jesus was going to be our new high priest. In chapter 5, verse 10, we see that Jesus was going to be a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And then last chapter, at the end of chapter 6, in verse 20, it says, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after Melchizedek. And so, it's like the preacher. He was getting ahead of himself, and he kept dropping the hints about how Jesus would be this high priest, and how he'd be the high priest of this order, the order of Melchizedek. But now in chapter 7, he's going to take time to just really focus and highlight on what that means. And so, Melchizedek, this mysterious guy, we have him first in Genesis 14, in verses 17 through 20. What's happening in Genesis 14 is that Abraham is entering into Canaan, and we see that, his nephew Lot was kidnapped by some kings, and so Abraham goes out to battle against them, and there's this coalition of 5 kings, and Abraham goes to war against them, and he beats them, and he's come back to where he was living, and as he's coming back, he runs into this guy named Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is the priest of the Most High God. He's called the King of Righteousness and the King of Salem. And we see that Abraham gives him a tithe, and Melchizedek blesses him. And that's what we know about Melchizedek from Genesis. And what the author of Hebrews does is he kind of reads for us in chapter 7, starting in verse 1. It says this: For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And to Abraham apportioned Abraham apportioned the 10th part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then he is also King of Salem, the peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. And so, we're told a little bit about this encounter from Genesis, and then we're told a little bit about who he is, and just the mysterious nature of this man, Melchizedek. So first of all, his name, Melchizedek, means King of Righteousness. And his title is King of Salem, which is translated as King of Peace. And so Melchizedek is the King of Righteousness, this King of Peace, which we're going to see is fully fulfilled in the righteous one, who is the only one that can bring us peace. But he's also the priest of the Most High God. And so in this person, Melchizedek, we see a king and a priest united in one person. And he's the only person in the Old Testament that we actually see that's both king and priest. Because as we go through the Old Testament, we see that the priestly lineage came through the tribe of Levi. The kingly lineage came through the tribe of Judah, but there was never a priest and never a king who was a priest. So Melchizedek is this one and only king priest, but he's pointing forward to Jesus, who would be the perfect king priest. And so that's who we have here, this man Melchizedek. He's priest of the Most High God. Now this is an interesting thing for us because he meets Abraham, who is some 400 plus years before the law was ever given, before the priesthood was ever set up. Melchizedek was a priest of the Most High God. Before the law, before the implementation of the Levitical and Aaronic priesthood, Melchizedek was a priest of God. And we see through this account that he's better than Abraham. And that's kind of what the preacher of Hebrews has been doing. He's been establishing how Jesus is better than the heroes from the Old Testament, right? He's better than the angels. He's better than Moses. Now he's better than Abraham, we're going to see, because he's likened to this man, Melchizedek, who is also better than Abraham. And so the point that he makes here is that Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, or better than Abraham. Verse 6, because Abraham gave a tithe of his spoils to Melchizedek. So look at verse 6. It says, but this man, who does not have his descent from them, received tithes from Abraham. So this is the first reason showing that Melchizedek is greater than Abraham gave to Melchizedek. And then the second thing he says in verse 6 is that not only that, but that Melchizedek blessed Abraham, which was a sign of the give the blessing to the lesser. And if we're not understanding that, he goes on to say this for us in verse 7. It is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. And so he's setting up this case that Abraham is greater than Melchizedek. Or excuse me, that Melchizedek is greater than Abraham because Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek. And so if Abraham is lesser or the inferior in this case, Melchizedek is the superior, he also goes on to say that not only was Melchizedek greater than Abraham, but he's also greater than Levi, who all of our priests came in line after. And he does that in verse 9 and 10. He says, one might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, for he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. So I'm a math teacher, and this is kind of that transitive property. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C kind of thing, right? Well, if Abraham is less than Melchizedek and Levi is in Abraham, then that means that Levi is also less than Melchizedek. And so this man Melchizedek, this mysterious guy from the Old Testament, we're seeing is set up as being greater than Abraham, the father of the faith. He's greater than Levi, the father of all the priests. And so we're setting up that not only is he greater, but that his priesthood, is out this word, but his priesthood is greater than that was established through Abraham and through essentially Levi and Aaron. So that's how he's setting up that this priesthood is going to be greater. But it's not only greater just because Melchizedek is greater, but it's greater because this priesthood was given not by lineage, but by oath. To be a priest in the Old Testament, you had to be born of Aaron, or a son of Levi, as the different priesthoods go. And so, this priesthood of the order of Melchizedek, he was before all that. He's outside of all that. And so, we see that his priesthood, given to Jesus, was made by an oath. Look at verses 20 through 21. It says this, and it was not without an oath, for those who formerly became priests were made such without an oath. But this one was made a priest with an oath by the one who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. And that now is a quote from Psalm 110, verse 4. And this is the only other verse where this man Melchizedek is mentioned. And it's that you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. It's quoted again up in verse 17. So we see that because Melchizedek was greater than Abraham, because he was greater than Levi, because this priesthood was by an oath, that his priesthood is a greater priesthood than that of Levi, than that of Aaron. Charles Spurgeon quotes about Psalm 110. He says this, the order of Melchizedek's priesthood was the most ancient and primitive because it came before the giving of the law. It was the most free from ritual and ceremony because it didn't have these prescriptions that go along with it that we see with the Levitical and Aaronic priesthoods. And it's the most natural and simple because it's given by an oath. And at the same time, it's the most honorable. So we see that this priesthood, this order of Melchizedek that Jesus is now a priest of forever, that priesthood is lifted up above the other priesthoods of the Old Testament. So that's one way in which Jesus is the better, superior, perfect high priest. But he's also this better, perfect, superior high priest by the nature of his perfect life. And so the preacher of Hebrews, he goes on to talk about Jesus' life and how that sets him up to be a greater priest. Starting in verse 16, he says, because of his indestructible life. So those who became priests by a legal requirement concerning bodily descent, but Jesus became a priest by the power of his indestructible life. And what I love about this word indestructible is that it takes us right back to Jesus' death and resurrection. Because in Jesus' death, Satan tried to destroy Jesus' life. But 3 days later, he rose from the grave, proving that his life is indestructible. And so with that, I can only say amen, church, because Jesus is alive. He's not dead. His life cannot be destroyed. And so building upon that, his life is perpetual, or he's going to live forever. And so that's the only way that he can be a priest, according to the order of Melchizedek, forever, is that he lives forever. And so he will be also permanent. Look at verse 24. But he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. So we see other priests. There would be priest after priest after priest after priest, because one priest would live and then die. And then another priest would have to fill in his shoes behind him. But Jesus, being named priest forever, no one's going to come after him, because there's going to be no one to come after him, because he's going to still be fulfilling that forever. And so that ties back to Psalm 110, verse 4. That ties back to the quotes in chapter 7, verse 17 and 21. And he can only be the fulfillment of that Psalm 110, verse 4 reference, because he's the only one that will live forever. And then from the text that we read this morning, church, look at verse 26. Okay, the next aspect of Jesus' life, better as a priest, superior as a priest, perfect as a priest, is that he had lived a holy life. So his life is indestructible, it will go on forever, and it was holy. Verse 26 says, for it was fitting indeed that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. And so these are the words that this preacher is using to describe how Jesus lived. Is that he lived this holy life. It was completely separate, innocent, unstained. We can look at the Old Testament, we can see, as I talked about before, the purpose of the Old Testament was to show us that God was holy, that we're not. And we see that Jesus lived that holy life. He's the only one that perfectly fulfilled the law of God. He's the only one that could perfectly keep the law of God. His life was unstained. He had no sin. And it says that he was separated from sinners, which doesn't mean that Jesus had nothing to do with sinners and that he lived over here and sinners lived over here. But the way that he lived his life was so different, because it was living up to the standard of God, that you can look at his life and see how completely different it was from everyone else. He lived a life separate from them, in that he lived a life that was honoring to God, unlike anyone else, because he had no sin, because he was holy. And then the last thing it says that he was exalted above the heavens. He has this exalted life, and that's really the author of Hebrews has been doing. He's been exalting Jesus as being greater than the angels, as greater than Moses, as greater than Abraham. And so throughout this whole book, we've been seeing the greatness of Jesus, the exalted nature of him and his life. And I just want to read back to us where we started in the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, as we look at this exalted nature of Jesus' life. It says, long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Amen. He is the radiance of the glory of God. I mean, we're talking about how different Jesus was. We're created in the image of God. Jesus is God. He's the exact imprint of his nature. We are part of creation. Jesus is creator, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. He's holding it all together. And so we see this exalted nature of Jesus. And so, by the nature of his life, he was established and set up to be this better, superior, perfect high priest. And then, finally, he's this better, superior, perfect high priest by the nature of his sacrifice. As we read through the Old Testament, as we look at the setting up of the law in the book of Leviticus, we see that the priests would offer goats and sheep and bulls and pigeons and turtle doves and all these different things for all these different circumstances. There were, different offerings that they would give. But the sin offering is the one that we think of a lot, where people would have to go and offer sacrifices because of their sin. But they'd offer a sacrifice one day, and they'd sin again, and the next day, what? They'd have to go and offer another sacrifice. And so their lives were just continually offering sacrifices. And the reason why they had to continue to offer the sacrifices is because a bull or a goat or a sheep, it's not enough to appease the wrath of God. It might put it off for a moment. It was never enough. It was always pointing forward to Jesus and his perfect sacrifice. Because we can put a price on a goat. We can put a price on a bull or a sheep or a turtle dove or pigeons. But Jesus offered himself. And we can put no price on his life. Jesus sacrificed himself, it says, look at verse 27. He had no need like the other high priests to offer sacrifices daily. First for his own sins, because he was holy, and then for all. Or then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. He only had to offer himself once for all. It wasn't daily or yearly. It didn't have to be made again and again, because Jesus' life was of infinite worth. And so it only had to be offered once to cover the sins of all who would believe. One of the sacrifices that we're most familiar with from the Old Testament was that of the Passover. We talk about Passover a lot. It's because it's celebrated regularly each year around Easter. And in that sacrifice, what would happen is the people of Israel, it was established during the plagues in Egypt, and they offered this sacrifice because God said that death was going to come over the land, and he was going to take out the firstborn of all the homes of the Egyptians, and anyone else who didn't make this sacrifice and then put the blood across the top of the doors and down the sides, right? That's how this sacrifice of the Passover went. But they had to offer year after year after that first time as a remembrance of God passing over them because they believed in what God said. They put their faith in that. They put the blood on their doorposts. God passed over and they received grace and mercy instead of the wrath that the people of Egypt received. And so Jesus now becomes that perfect lamb that only had to be offered once for us. And if our faith is in Him, then we can be brought into that right relationship with God. He only had to do it. I love that we read in Hebrews 1, verses 1 through 3, because if I read it in verse 3, it says that after making purification for sins, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. The priest's job never ended. They had each and every day, all day long, for the people who put their faith in the. But Jesus offered us once, and on the cross, what did He say? He said, "It is finished." Never again does the sacrifice have to be offered. And when He rose with God, He sat down because He never had to offer a sacrifice again. And so His sacrifice was perfect. So let's go back to where we started. We read verse 18. That the former commandment, the old priesthood, was weak, it was useless, made nothing perfect. But, in verse 19, on the other hand, a better hope is introduced, through which we draw near to God. That better hope is Jesus. Remember, we're talking about being this priest, this go-between, this person that's staying us and God, and mends the relationship, just like the mechanic relationship with my car. And Jesus is now the better hope near to God, that we can actually come into right relationship with God because He is the perfect high priest. And so what does it mean for us? Look at verse 25. Because Jesus is this better, superior, perfect high priest, verse 25, consequently, He is able to save to the uttermost those who draw God through Him, since He all lives to make intercession for them. Amen. Consequently, as a result, we just talked about, as a result of Jesus being a part of this high priest, or this different priestly order, this better priestly order, as a result of Jesus' life, as a result of Jesus' perfect sacrifice, He gave to the uttermost. Jesus' sacrifice didn't just appease the wrath of God for a time. It completely paid the wrath of God towards sin for us. Saved us from the wrath of God. And it saves to the uttermost. Or we could say this, that He is able to save forever, completely, perfectly, for all eternity, who would draw near to God through Him. Salvation is in Christ. It's complete for all the past sins that we've committed, but also those that we would commit in the future, because He will save to the uttermost. Completely, perfectly, for all eternity. He continues to save us because we continue to fall into sin, but He continues to forgive us of those sins if our faith is in Him. And that's in that He's saved to the uttermost those who draw near to God, those who believe in Him, trust Him, put their faith in Him. Like if you in Egypt, God's saying He's angel of death basically over the land. So wipe out the firstborn of every family. But all you have to do to make sure that doesn't happen to you is slaughter a lamb, put its blood on your doorpost. That seems crazy, right? All they had to do was go through that action, sacrifice that lamb, put that blood there, and believe that God will pass over them. What did He do? He passed over them. He gave them grace and mercy. All we have to do is believe in, put our faith in, trust in Jesus' sacrifice, that once for all, to pay for our sins, my sins, your sins, anyone's sins, past, present, who would believe in Him. the gospel. That's what we celebrate. That's how Jesus is our perfect high priest. And it says that he's able to save to the uttermost, since he always lives to make intercession for them. I love this. Jesus is not forgotten about us. Sit up to be with God, sit down, and now he's playing Xbox or something. Like, he's living to make intercession for us. He's pleading for us on behalf of us to God. He's being that mediator. He's being that mediatory agent. He's being that go-between us until we're in his presence. He will pray for us. He lives to be the go-between. He is the only one who can put his hand on God, put his hand on man, and bring us together because of his sacrifice. And so this is how we know that the uttermost lives to make intercession. He lives to be that go-between between us and God if we draw near to him. The question is this morning, have you drawn? Maybe it's been a while. The invitation is to draw near to him today. Maybe it's that you've never done, or maybe it's something that you don't even know how to do. Well, like I said, it starts with belief. In Acts 16:31, it says, "Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you will be saved." He is able to save the uttermost those who are near to him, those who put their faith in him. So that's where it starts. Because he is the perfect king priest who actually saves. He doesn't just appease the wrath of God, but he saves us from the wrath of God. If you draw near to God, let this serve as encouragement to draw nearer to God. There is no sense being too close to God. Sometimes we get in the way of ourselves drawing near to God, drawing near to God. Remember that he has fixed what is broken. He is the one that brings us perfectly back in right relationship with God. Put a relationship on right terms with him, so we can draw nearer to him. And so I would encourage you to draw near to God through reading your Bible daily. Draw near to God through prayer often. Draw near to God by worshiping regularly. And it's not through our actions, but through our dependence upon him, perfect high priest, who lives to make intercession, that we can draw near to God. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for Jesus, that you sent him to be the better, superior, perfect high priest who stands in the gap between us and you and brings us back into right relationship with you because of his perfect life, because of perfect sacrifice, because he is the priest. I pray, Lord, for those who maybe have never drawn near to you, that they would draw near to you today, and that for have drawn near to you, that we would be drawing near to you because of the lengths that you went to draw a relationship with you. We thank you for the great love that you've shown to us. We thank you for the great lengths that you went to bring us into relationship with you, God. You hear this morning that you are perfect high priest. In his name we pray. Amen. As a way to draw near to God, we do this each week. We have communion. So hopefully you guys picked up your communion on the way in. If not, I guess you can grab one on the way out and do it later. I don't know how that goes. So, but we have these little single serve and bread, and I've never done this, so it's all morning. Like I said, I haven't been to church in 3 months, so I'm excited to celebrate communion with you. But like we get to see Jesus' perfect life on display and his perfect sacrifice here in the elements of communion. With the bread that's here with us. Oh man, I'm not even do this. It's 2 tabs. We have Jesus' perfect life represented for us in this wafer. And it's his perfect, unstained, righteous life represented in this unleavened bread that as we bite down on it in a moment, we're crushing just as he was crushed for us. But then we also have this sweet juice representing his blood that was poured out to bring us into that right relationship with God, to wash our sins away so that we could be made right and we could be on right terms with God through his sacrifice. And so, when you're ready, church, let's partake in the body of Christ that was broken for us, the blood of Christ that was shed for us, and let us draw near to him this morning. Amen.
As we continue to take communion, my hope is that we continue to just sit and rejoice that Christ died for us, that he currently lives and intercedes for us. Oftentimes in this season, I offer up a prayer of thanksgiving during our offering time. I will provide for our needs and for the needs of our city. And as a reminder, you can give to our church at big.com. There's a couple other ways as well. Thank you for those of you who regularly give. All that money goes paying bills here locally for doing mission in our city. A lot of it goes immediately out the door to help churches in hard places. But if you please join me in this time, let's pray and thank our God. Lord, today, when you teach us to pray, that we are to pray for God to give us this day our daily bread. God, we recognize that you are a provider, that right now we can make intercession for us before God the Father. You are aware of each of our needs and our weaknesses and what we are coming to you with. Lord, we pray that you hear our prayers and God, you provide for our friends and our family, that you present and show us how you provide for us each and every day. Lord, it's in Jesus' name we pray for all this. Amen. Let's continue to worship. You guys stand with me as we continue to worship this morning. Cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Praise the name. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord, oh Lord our God. the third. On the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, triple death, where is your sting? The angels roar, for Christ our King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. We shall return. We shall return in robes of white. The blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints. My gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Sing, oh, praise the name. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. Oh, praise. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. Oh Lord our God. Amen.
All right, everybody, that is our service for the day.
Before you go out, just a reminder, if you want to serve your kids, come talk to me. If you want to come grab a coffee with us at 11:30, we're going to be over at Old World, which the parking for it is off of Proctor Way. If you haven't been there before, it's on the reverse side of the Union. And if you have food or you want to donate, you can do that as well. And as you go out, please remember that we have a better high priest who lasts eternally. And so my encouragement to you this week is to remember that, and to cry out to God, and to remember that He hears you and that He's praying for you and making intercession for you. And as you go out, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He cause His face to shine on you, and may He give you peace. Go in peace, church. Amen.
It's easier to get on and off.
This.
You just toss it on that bottom, or that top shelf right there.
Andrew on vacation?
Yeah, he's taking something out. Alright. Something happened with the cable.
Oh, really? It's a long cable.